What's going on, everyone? I'm James Lynch, and this is Early Look, the show where I take a look at an upcoming notable fight. And on today's edition, we're going to be talking about the Cory Sandhagen, Marlon Chito Vera bantamweight fight, which is going to headline UFC Vegas 69 at the Apex on February 18th. But before I give you my preview and pick, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Those three things really do help out this channel big time. All right, really excited for this one. Fight of the year candidate, dare I say. And if you haven't watched the show before, basically I go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles, and then at the end I give you my pick. You can agree or disagree. You can take these stats or you can leave it. Doesn't really matter to me. I just like looking at this fight from all different angles. So I mentioned it there. February 18th, UFC Apex, smaller cage. You would have to think that favors Chito Vera a little bit just because we've seen more finishes from him, especially via knockout. So I would say that slightly favors Vera, but nonetheless should be very interesting. It's too bad we don't get a crowd for this one, but nonetheless, very happy to see this fight put together here. Let's start doing a quick tail of the tape. You can see there Chito Vera 22-7-1, Cory Sandhagen 15-4. 30 years old for Vera, 30 years old for Sandhagen. 5'8" to 5'11", 70.5 to 70. So you'll see there Sandhagen having a bit of a height advantage and Chito Vera just having a slight reach advantage in this fight. Let's start first with the former title challenger, Cory Sandhagen, shall we? Let's get into it. So I mentioned it there, 15-4 record. He's got 7 knockouts, 3 submissions, and 5 decisions. He's currently ranked number 5 in the bantamweight division at the time of recording this. He's 30 years old. He's going to be turning 31 in April, you can see there. He's 5'11" with a 70-inch reach. And like I mentioned, just a 3-inch height advantage for him in this fight. He is training out of Elevation Fight Team, and he's a BJJ brown belt. Cory Sandhagen has got Fight of the Night 2 times against Yuri Alcantara and Petr Yan. He's got Performance of the Night 2 times against Marlon Vera and Frankie Edgar. Those were 2 highlight reel finishes. Don't blame him for for him getting the Performance of the Night bonus. Let's go look all the way back at Cory Sandhagen's career. He made his amateur debut back in September of 2012, made his pro debut in May of 2015. Chito Vera, by that point, already had 12 fights. So even though they're the same age, Chito, a lot more experience overall. Cory Sandhagen made his debut his UFC debut, I should say, in January 2018 after carving a couple of fights out in RFA and LFA and then signing with the UFC in January 2018, making his debut at featherweight against Austin Arnett. We'll mention the weight classes in a second here. By the time Cory made his UFC debut in January 2018, Chito Vera had 7 UFC fights, so just something to keep in mind for that fight. Cory Sandhagen has an 8-3 UFC record. He's got 6 finishes. Some notable wins for Cory Sandhagen. John Lineker at the time, very good win. That was sort of one of the ones that I think woke people up in terms of, okay, this guy's got some talent. Rafael Sunsao, I know Sunsao been on a bit of a decline, but he was ranked at the time when Sandhagen defeated him. Marlon Vera, finishing him in the second round of that fight. Frankie Edgar, the former lightweight champion. And then Song Yadong in his last fight. Song, a ranked opponent. Very good win for Cory Sandhagen there, getting the finish in the 4th round. Some notable losses. Obviously, the big one, Aljamain Sterling, still the only opponent to finish Cory Sandhagen in the UFC. Of course, we saw a much more improved Sandhagen after that loss in that fight. And then his fight against TJ Dillashaw was a split decision loss. We'll talk about that decision in a second. And then Petr Yan, he lost that title fight back in October of 2021. So again, you look at who he's lost to, it's only the best in the division when it comes to that. Like I mentioned, Sandhagen has competed in different weight classes. He's fought 11 times at bantamweight. This fight against Vera will be his 12th. And he's fought 8 times at featherweight. So he mainly fought at featherweight on the regional scene. And then it wasn't until he got to the UFC that he dropped the weight class. One thing with Sandhagen, much like his opponent, very active. No major layoffs in his career. No major injuries, anything like that. The only layoff he had was actually going from Petr Yan to Song Yadong. There was a 322-day layoff there, but outside of that, he's been pretty active, fighting at least 2-3 times a year throughout his career. Now, I mentioned some split decisions here. Wanted to go back to the fight with John Lineker. That was back at UFC on ESPN 8. Fight that Sandhagen did end up winning by 3-round decision. Looked at the scorecards for that on MMA Decisions. 7 media members scoring the fight for Sandhagen, 10 media members scoring the fight for John Lineker. So some people feeling like, the majority, I should say, as far as media members go, feeling that John Lineker did enough to win that fight. Again, you can find all those scorecards on MMADecisions.com. It's a great database for seeing media scorecards after the fights. They can, they can submit their scorecards there. So yeah, 10 media members scoring it for Lineker, 7 scoring it for Sandhagen, and that fight took place in April of 2019. Then the other close fight that Sandhagen had was against TJ Dillashaw, and I remember watching that one live, and thinking that probably should have gone Cory's way, and that was at UFC Fight Night, UFC on ESPN 27. That was July of 2021. Went back and looked at the media scorecards for that. 6 media members scoring the fight for Dillashaw, 17 media members scoring the fight for Sandhagen. So again, I think a lot of people feeling like Sandhagen should have got the nod there, but regardless, his record would be the same because, again, probably should have lost to Lineker, probably should have beat Dillashaw. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. So that's pretty much it for Cory Sandhagen. Very interesting guy. I have interviewed Cory Sandhagen ahead of this fight. You can find that interview on my UFC interviews playlist. Really good insight in how the fight came together and who he's working with this camp. He's actually going to be working with Bellator bantamweight champion Sergio Pettis. So if you guys want to check that out for a little bit more insight, by all means, go for it. That's what the channel's for. Let's talk about his opponent here, Marlon Chito Vera, one of the most interesting fighters in the weight class in a good way. I don't mean that in a bad way. He is 22-7-1. He's got 8 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 4 decisions. He's the number 4th ranked UFC bantamweight. Just like Cory Sandhagen, he is 30 years old. Actually, Chito just turned 30 in December, on December 2nd. So again, Sandhagen, a little bit older, but not by much. They're both 30 is kind of what we're getting at here. He is 5'8" with a 70.5-inch reach. The only advantage that Chito has physically in this fight is that he's got 0.5 of a reach advantage, not much at all. Chito Vera is a BJJ black belt, unlike Cory Sandhagen, who I mentioned as a brown belt. And Chito Vera had been training at Timo Yama's for a while. Now he's at RBCA Ruka, I believe it's what it's called, or unless those are 2 different gyms. But Jason Perillo, that's who he's been working with. Really great gym over there. Jason Perillo, of course, great coach who has worked with the likes of BJ Penn and Michael Bisping and Luke Rockhold and so many other fighters. So really good gym there. Check out these accolades for Chito Vera. I kind of forgot how many interesting notes he has on his resume here. Check this out. He's got performance of the night 5 times against Roman Salazar, Brad Pickett, Andre Ewell, Frankie Edgar, and Dominic Cruz. He's got fight of the night 3 times against Song Yadong, Davey Grant, and Rob Font. He's got the most finishes in UFC bantamweight division history with 10. Very impressive. He's tied with Uriah Faber for the second most fights in UFC bantamweight history at 17. He's tied with Rafael Assunção for the 3rd most wins in UFC bantamweight division history at 12, and he's second in most knockouts in UFC bantamweight division history with 6. So quite the resume there for Chito Vera. Again, they're the same age, but a lot more fights there for Chito Vera overall. As far as weight classes, Chito has competed in a couple different weight classes as well. He's had 2 catchweight fights, one at 140 pounds against Brad Pickett, and then he fought Rob Font at a catchweight of 138 because Font missed weight. So again, not his fault, but that's 2 catchweight fights that he's had. Other than that, he's fought 2 featherweight fights in his career, not as many as Sandhagen, and he's fought obviously a ton at bantamweight, 24, I think, if my math is correct on that now. On that one, I should say. Chito Vera competed on Tough Latin America back in 2014. I'm sure people know that, or maybe they don't. He defeated Henry Briones in the quarterfinals of that show, but unfortunately had to withdraw from the show, his semifinal bout, with a skin infection, and was replaced by Guido Canetti on that fight. He did end up getting a UFC contract and ended up fighting. He actually lost his debut. I'll just kind of look through it here. You see there, he made his UFC debut back at UFC 180, the Verdum versus Hunt card. Ended up losing a decision to Marco Beltran. But one of the cool things about Vera is that he's really turned things around in his career. Starting off his career, his UFC career, you can see there 1-2, and it hasn't looked back since then. He's looked amazing. Now, Chito Vera, as far as notable, I completely glanced over a bunch of stuff there. So Chito Vera made his amateur has never had an amateur debut. Now, didn't fight in the amateurs, I should say. Made his professional MMA debut in July 2010. You can see there. So a long time ago. Made his UFC debut, like I mentioned there, against Marco Beltran back in November of 2014. Chito Vera has a 14-6 UFC record. He's got 11 finishes, some notable wins for Chito Vera. He's got a lot of them. We can look at the Sean O'Malley win. Only guy to defeat O'Malley. Very, very, although Piotr Jan might have a case for that too. So Sean O'Malley defeated Frankie Edgar, and he's defeated Rob Font, and he defeated Dominic Cruz in his last fight. So all good wins. A couple of those former champions. Very, very good wins there. Some notable losses for Chito Vera include Song Yadong. We'll talk about that decision in a second. Jose Aldo, and then he also lost to John Lineker back in 2017. But again, Chito nowhere close to that fighter anymore. He's much more improved since then. So let's talk about the Song Yadong fight, UFC Fight Night, May 2020. That was on the Overeem Harris card. Went back and looked at the media scorecards for that one. 7 media members scoring the fight for Song Yadong, 9 scoring it for Marlon Chito Vera. So again, Chito Vera could be possibly 23-7-1 instead of, 23-6-1 instead of 22-7-1. So just something to keep in mind there. And like Cory Sandhagen, look at this. Chito Vera, super active here. Look at this. 2015, 2016. Oh, so there's a tiny bit of a layoff there between 2015 and 2016, actually. So there's a 266-day layoff there. But outside of that, look at this. 2016, fought shortly after that in 2017, fought 3 times in 2017, 3 times in 2018, 3 times in 2019, 3 times in 2020, and fought twice in 2021 and twice last year. So this is a very active fighter, and that's always good to see, right? Fighters that are going out there and, carrying that momentum back to back. So there we go. So that is Marlon Chito Vera. Let's get back to the fight itself, who I think is going to win. Close fight, very close fight. Like I said, the improvements that Chito Vera has made has been very, very noticeable. The Rob Font fight, to me, I know people will look at his finishes over Cruz and Edgar as maybe some signature wins for him, but I really think the Rob Font fight, to me anyways, was the fight that really, I think, put him into that contender spot. Rob Font, I know he's, on a bit of a skid lately, but Rob Font, a very good fighter in that weight class. And for Chito to go out there and basically outstrike him and take him to a decision and nearly finish Rob Font. Let's not forget that either. Rob Font, the New England Cartel, those guys, him and Cater, Calvin Cater, made a granite steal. So Chito was very close to finishing Rob in that fight and looked outstanding in that one. So to me, that was one of his best wins. I think with Cruz and Edgar, and I know you can make the same argument for Sandhagen, Cruz and Edgar, I mean, both guys are kind of on their way out, right? Cruz is not retired at the time of recording this, but I'm sure he's going to retire here soon. And Edgar was kind of close to retirement as well. And that fight, go back and watch that fight with Edgar. Edgar had some success early on in that fight. It wasn't until Chito front kick knocked him out in the third round that he obviously won the fight. But very, very interesting matchup. But again, Davey Grant, good win. Davey Grant not ranked, but kind of on the fringe there. O'Malley, I know people will say the injury. He was beating O'Malley. And then Font, to me, that was the most signature win for him as well. And, it's interesting because I asked Cory Sandhagen in our interview about the critics who say the same thing about Sandhagen, because, I just pointed out there how the Edgar and Cruz wins, they're guys on their way out, so to speak. And to me, Font is the best win that he's had. But I asked Sandhagen about his wins as well, because he also has a finish over Frankie Edgar, who, like I mentioned, was on the way to retirement, as was Marlon Moraes, right? Moraes had a couple knockout losses after that, then went on to PFL, got knocked out in that fight too. So I think there's a chin issue there with Moraes. But I asked Sandhagen about that, and he had a pretty good response. He's like, hey, listen, that's true. I fought 2 guys that are kind of on their way out. However, I didn't take much damage in any of those fights, and I was looking good in those fights. And he's right. Like I said, Edgar Vera, it was a much closer fight leading up to the finish as opposed to Sandhagen in both of his fights as well. So that's just something to keep in mind. And they do have a common opponent in Song Yadong. But again, I think when Vera fought Song, I thought he won that fight. And again, I think he's much more improved since then. So with all that said, again, I'm expecting a very close fight. I'm expecting this fight to go the distance. I'll just say that right off the bat. Sandhagen has only been finished the one time against Aljamain Sterling. I think that was a one-off. I think we've seen Sandhagen go toe-to-toe with guys like Petr Yan and TJ Dillashaw, who were not able to finish Sandhagen in those fights. And personally, I thought Sandhagen won the Dillashaw fight as well. You also have to remember that Yan fight was on short notice. It was 5 rounds. I had someone giving me some MMA math being like, well, Chito beat Sean O'Malley and Sean O'Malley beat Petr Yan. Well, I think most people would agree that Petr Yan probably deserved to get that win over O'Malley, and Sandhagen fought him on short notice and it was 5 rounds. A bit of a different situation there. So, like I said, 2 guys extremely durable. Sandhagen has had some finishes, but much like Chito Vera, they're finishes over guys that have some issues. I mean, Song Yadong was a doctor stoppage and it was in the 4th round, so it was a bit later, but you don't really know Sandhagen for being much of a finisher. I know he's had these wins over Arnett and Alcantara and Batista and all these guys, but not against like solid top 15 opponents for the most part. So I don't think we'll see a finish there. And then it comes down to how's this fight going to end? Now, could Chito Vera outstrike Cory Sandhagen? It's possible. But one of the things that Sandhagen does very well is not take a lot of damage. He's very methodical. He's very good about his movement. Again, neither guy has any advantage with the height and reach. I do think Vera has more power, but I think Sandhagen's a bit more technical when it comes to his striking. Now, there is the concern about the ground game, right? Like Sandhagen got submitted by Sterling, but that was, I just think, I don't want to say a fluke, but it was very unusual for Sandhagen, and I think his ground game has improved since then. Chito Vera has some submission wins. We've seen it, although the last submission win he had was against Nolan Hernandez, who I don't even think got a UFC win. He had a couple fights and then got released after that. So I suppose it's possible Chito Vera could take this to the ground. But again, I think you look at Sandhagen, it's not like he's a white belt. He's a guy, has a decent set of jiu-jitsu. So I don't think Chito will submit him there. What I think will end up happening in this fight is I think Sandhagen will pick his shots. I think he'll avoid the power shots of Vera, and I think as the fight goes on, and again, I think Sandhagen's got pretty good cardio. We saw that in the fight against Petr Yan. I think Sandhagen's going to edge out Vera just slightly. I think this is a 50-50 fight. I could absolutely see Vera getting the decision here as well, landing the more power shots and that looking good in the eyes of the judges. I could see this being like a split decision, really. I do think this is very, very even in terms of what both guys have done. Obviously, Vera's got the edge in experience, but you could also say that maybe he's taken a bit more damage than Sandhagen, which I think is fair. So my official pick is going to be Cory Sandhagen by decision. But again, this is a fight where I think Chito Vera could steal it here. I know I say this a lot in these shows, but that's why these fights are so good, is that in a lot of cases, they are very close. And I just think this is one where I think the fight goes the distance, and I think Sandhagen edges it out. Now, again, smaller cage does favor Vera. I did mention that off the top, but that's if he's able to hit Sandhagen. I don't think he's going to be able to hit him as easy as he did to, say, Rob Font and some of the other guys that he's fought. So my official pick is going to be Cory Sandhagen. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Who are you picking in this fight? Who do you think gets it done? Let me know. Let's have a discussion here. I'm always happy to talk about fights as long as you guys are cool about it. And you know what I mean by that. No name calling, none of that stuff. Let's talk about this fight. And also, if you guys have any other fights you want me to preview, let me know. I'm going to try and do more of these previews this year. That is one thing I've kind of made a point of doing, is just, not necessarily just the main events and the title fights. I want to get some other interesting fights. Like if you see an interesting matchup, could even be in a different promotion too, let me know. I'd be more than happy to hear your feedback here. Follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. While you're there, hit that notification bell and hit that like button. The like button really does help out the algorithm. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.